welcome back to English 11. This is an overview for Cycle 4. So the place that we should always be starting at the beginning of a new week is here in weekly agendas. And as I just said, we're up to Cycle 4, which is starting September 9th. When you click to open the agenda, you should have a document that looks like this. And these are the two parts that I think are most important for you to be aware of. This week we only have one lesson, Lesson 6, but it's a pretty long one, so we're going to be chunking that into smaller sections as we're going through your Zoom cycles throughout this week. And by the 13th, which is a Sunday, that's when I'll be checking and putting that grade in to make sure we are paced and ready for the Quiz 2. This is going to be over all of the lessons that we covered both last cycle and this cycle, that Lesson 6 punctuation. So Mr. Murway will give you a preview of that at the end so you know what that's going to look like. But you cannot open this quiz until we finish Lesson 6. So it's really important to make sure we're keeping on top of things. By September the 15th is when items will be counted as late if they are not turned in yet. So once again, assessment, those are the grades you're getting. So we have Lesson 6, 10 points, and then Quiz 2, which is worth double points. And on that one, you'll only get one attempt. So please make sure you're ready to take that. Mr. Murway, once again, will give you some pointers. All right, so let's take a look at Lesson 6. That's going to be located in Schools PLP. And a reminder, you should be going to Centrify or using that adaptive and clicking here on the little chalkboard icon. And we're looking at Lesson 6. So this is a lot of punctuation marks, both at the end of sentences and within sentences. So hopefully a lot of this is review, but there are a lot of rules for us to cover. So at the top, it's just going to give you a reminder of what all of the punctuation marks look like, followed by end marks and their uses. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a little hint. When I was looking at the questions, I really had to go back up and use this to figure out an answer. So you'll notice here punctuation marks with periods, a rule that we might not think much about because we usually think at the end of a sentence, is if you are working on something like an outline, after numbers, when you are using an outline form or letters, you need to put a period after that, and that's going to help you with an answer in a little bit that I'll show you. So ellipsis is this little dot, 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 and we probably see that and use that a lot in sentences or at the end when we're kind of trailing off. But the main purpose for that is to show that we have cut out a section of text, especially when we're quoting. So we know right here a section has been removed. So this was the beginning of the sentence and the end, and a chunk was removed. In this example, a chunk was removed from the very end of it. So that's the rule for an ellipsis. So after that, you're going to have some questions about punctuation. And I will also caution you, while they don't say you're looking for capitalization rules, you are. And so that's something we covered in Lesson 5 previously. So don't just focus on the punctuation. You're also looking at like art history. Do we capitalize it or not? So there's really two things you're looking for, punctuation and capitalization for those. And then when you get down here to question 5, this is your freebie. So we're looking at if we have an outline here, after these Roman numerals, are they punctuated correctly? And the rule at the top said after we either use letters or numbers, we do put a period there. So for this one, it is correctly punctuated. Okay, for commas, I'm going to tell you to really skim through this and constantly refer back to these notes as you're working on the lesson. There are a lot of reasons that we use commas in sentences. So if we're listing items, we'll use commas. If you have sort of an introductory phrase, you use commas. If you interrupt, have like an appositive phrase, kind of a little extra information, and the list goes on and on. So please make sure that you're really skimming through this, and when you get to the follow-up questions where it says select the sentence with correctly placed commas, you're going to notice that a few different rules apply that you're looking for. So we have an introductory person, and then we've also got items listed. So you might need to read all the way to the end and look at multiple rules for the comma section. And there are a lot. So up next, Ms. Potts is going to cover colons and semicolons and a few more topics.
Hi everybody, today we're going to go over colons and semicolons, quotation marks and some other things. I just want to bring your attention to the colons and the semicolons section of the text. Notice you'll see that they tell you the different ways that each can be used. Just highlight that, colons separate a list, okay? They can introduce a quotation, okay? New rule here, they can also separate an independent clause from an independent clause in a compound sentence, but you capitalize afterward. That's interesting. In business letters, you would use colons, and then also in time, volume, books in the Bible, things like that, right? All right, semicolons, okay, can join two independent clauses in a sentence, okay? Typically, in the middle of a long sentence, if you see a word like however, or therefore, or nonetheless, if it's in the middle of a long sentence, probably have a semicolon issue there that you want to check out. Okay? Semicolons can also separate long lists where there are already commas, so that you don't get confused with commas. And as always, you have a handy video there, okay, that you can use to check your answers. Alright, so let's look at question 12 together. Remember that I gave you that tip about if there is a therefore or a however in the middle of a long sentence. So you certainly don't want option 1. Okay, you might want this one. Artists often dedicate long hours to the pursuit of their vocation. Therefore, they may, without thinking about it, stay up until all hours of the night. That looks correct to me. This does not look correct to me because of that weird comma before and therefore. Okay, so I'm not going to take that one. Double check your answers, but you might want to think that it's option B on that one. Okay. Question number 13 is asking you a colon issue. Okay, so be careful with that one. Okay. I'm going to give you a freebie on number 14 because they don't give you the correct answer. I'm going to go ahead and give you that one. Alright. Apostrophes, everybody, you already know. Apostrophes can create possessives, okay, or contractions. The rules become a little bit different when it's to form a singular possessive. You just put at the end of the word apostrophe S. Okay? If it's a plural possessive, it goes after the S in the word. Okay? And then also contractions, you guys know that. Okay? And then you would answer a question, sorry about that. 15, 16, 17, 18. Alright. And then quotation marks. Quotation marks are for titles. They are for direct statements, okay, or for rewording within. Alright, and then you would cover 20 through 22. I do want to direct your attention that when you have quotation marks at the end of a sentence, you want the punctuation mark to go within. So I'll give you that little hint. You always want the punctuation mark to go within the quotations. Alright, that's it.
Hi everybody, next up we are looking at a few other different types of punctuation, and this one is pretty tricky because you have everything from hyphens to dashes and different types of dashes. For me personally and Miss Godfrey and Miss Potts, this is a tricky section just because everything looks so similar, so pay very, very close attention to when and why you actually use each type of dash. So starting with hyphens, some examples and rules that you should be looking back to when you actually go through the quiz are to connect compound words or to connect prefixes, and PLP does a nice job of some examples right below the different types of rules associated with hyphens. And then the next section we'll get into the two different types of dashes, which are the M and the N. One with an M, one with an N. One is longer, that's the first one, M, and one is shorter, that's the second one, N. And the very next section breaks down when and why we use those, just like the hyphens. So the very first one is the M, and this is the longer dash. This is probably the more common dash used in a full sentence, because when you have, for example, information that's set outside of the full meaning of the sentence, you would put M with an M dashes around that extra information in the middle, compared to an N dash, which is usually used for short phrases like whether somebody was born to when they passed away, or 2 page numbers. These are the shorter N dashes that connect shorter phrases, usually. So when you get to your questions, just like Ms. Godfrey and Ms. Potts went over, it's a little tricky because it's going to ask you to consider multiple different rules all in one choice. So a lot of the questions will be phrased as, decide which of the following sentences is properly punctuated, punctuated meaning any of the rules that we just learned or can go back to up top. And for this example, this is your freebie, we'll break down the 2 different rules. So if your sentence reads, Lee's favorite classes, art history, drawing 2, and oil painting 1, were crammed with ambitious, hardworking students. You're really considering 2 things. Do I have the right types of dashes? And should there be a comma there? So hopefully you get to the point where your brain will recognize, I use the longer dashes here because I have extra information here in the middle of my sentence. I could technically cover it and the sentence would still read properly. And then the second thing in the same sentence is, do I have a comma here, yes or no? Well, if I scrolled back up, you would see that if you have 2 like or similar adjectives describing the noun students, a comma would make sense, because usually somebody that is hardworking is ambitious. So those are a pair, they go together. Then, after you answer a few questions related to dashes and hyphens, it will take you to the next and final section, which is parentheses and brackets. So very similar to hyphens and dashes, they are either very round and curved at the top right here with parentheses, or brackets, looks more like the side of a square. So that's visually the main difference. And just like the other sections, you have when we use them and examples of using them correctly. So you'll notice that parentheses are pretty similar to dashes, where they set off extra information that is non-essential to the full sentence's meaning. A quick trick and tip that we always use, we cover the information that's in the inside of it. Oops. So you would cover from Florence to Venice, and if you can still read your sentence, you probably need parentheses or dashes. The next section will be brackets. And brackets have quite a few different scenarios that will use them correctly, whether that is in the middle of a quotation mark or in the middle of textual evidence that you have where you're inserting information, all the way to here's material added to a phrase. So there's quite a few different scenarios, and again, keep this in mind as you're answering the yellow box quiz, whether that's a fill in the blank, or actually, is this punctuated correctly or not? So again, you won't really be able to use the trick Control F. However, what we encourage you to do is to constantly be looking at what the question says, and then going back and checking your rules for the examples, and then you will be in decent shape when you actually take the assessment. So that should wrap up lesson 6, which will take you all the way to the end, which is question 33. And after you've completed this, Ms. Godfrey or Ms. Potts will unlock the quiz, which is the second part of this cycle that you are completing. You'll notice that you have a time limit of 45 minutes, and you only get 1 attempt. There will be some special circumstances, but those are the 2 main guidelines that you'll follow. After you get to this page and you want to start your quiz, you'll have to say yes. And the biggest difference here, it looks very similar to the yellow boxes. However, you don't have your rules and information up top. So that is why we recommend doing the split screen and then having your guided notes over here or having your guided notes right in front of you. Either works for us. Just make sure you have your notes up for this when you're actually taking the quiz. So you'll scroll down and realize a plethora of different punctuation scenarios. And it'll take you all the way to the end. And you'll have everything from a true false to what is the correct punctuated sentence. And you even saw up top where there are some fill in the blank. So keep in mind there's a little bit of everything. And if you want this read to you, make sure you are using the Google extension, which is your puzzle piece up there at the top right, and you have the read aloud feature pinned to your web browser. Other than that, those are the two main parts, and we definitely wish you luck.